wanted to give an honorable mention and shout out to the universe because on this day and this date, 23 years ago, in this hour of power, I was creating and conceiving my son. Okay, I remember the day and the date and the hour that it happened. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful arrangement of scenarios, synchronicities, and energies and sensualities. They created such a beautiful masterpiece as my son, and I'm very grateful to be able to say and have this honorable mention on this date, 23 years later, to the date, and within the hour. Now, it was a different time zone. I'm on the other side of the world, but I just think I need to give a moment of glorious gratitude to make an honorable mention, okay, of the gloriousness that happened in that hour of power 23 years ago on this date to the date, okay? Gloriousness, okay? So, that being said, I had a dream that I was being fired from a so-called job. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have voluntarily not worked a so-called 9 to 5 since 2015. Okay? And that's been a process of deconditioning within itself in so many levels and so many ways that I'm very grateful that I've been able to explore, experiment with, and experience. Okay, it's been a blessing. Okay, so in this dream, it felt like I was in the southeast of the state somewhere, because it was a dirt road and it was just big old huge cornfield. I remember it being like a cornfield around, just like in the south somewhere. And it felt like it was in the country, and I don't know if it was like Mississippi or Arkansas. It felt like it was more Mississippi-ish though to me, for whatever reason. Anyway, if for those of you who ever seen the movie Kingdom Come, and you remember the character Anthony Anderson, it felt like and this is not the first time I've had dreams with celebrities in it. Like, that's a normal thing for me. But at any rate, he was in that movie. He was in my dream, and he was like in his pickup truck. And I was more the type, so in my real life, I'm really a very so-called self-reliant person. I don't say independent woman, but self-reliant person. So I don't expect people to do a lot of things because I've had to survive on my own for so long. So my coping mechanism is to just do it my goddamn self. And that's not a complaint or a tangent. It's just an observation and a reality. So I was getting ready to go on this job interview, and I was going to have to walk down this country ass road to get to this job interview. Or no, it wasn't a job interview. It was a meeting that the job wanted me to come to, and it was kind of like, it felt the vibe of like the exit interview that I experienced over here in this reality back in 2009 when I was let go of a really good so-called hot shit ass job in Chicago, Illinois. But that particular scenario actually made and changed and reshifted a trajectory for me in a way that benefited me to this point all these years later, and I'm real grateful about it. So back to that dream. So the vibe was, I was going down this country ass road, which I like, dirt road, unpaved, and I had on this dress that I in this reality do have, and I was wearing that to what I knew would be an exit interview. They had called me in. It was like, okay, we want to discuss, they didn't want to say exit interview. They were trying to make it like it was going to be a whole, just a, company meeting or whatever. But I knew what it was. I knew it was an exit interview. They was going to be letting me go and all that other nonsense. I wasn't worried about that. So this particular scenario, I was walking, and the character Anthony Anderson was in a pickup truck, and he was not once but 2 or 3 other times wanting to pick me up and offer me a ride to the office or the job, and it was a bit of ways, but I was willing to walk it. And just so, and I'm thinking about it now, I remember back in 2000 when I first moved up to Chicago, I did live in the suburban area of what they call Park Forest, Illinois. And that was, very rural, and it was all cornfields and shit. But it was near cornfields and all that. But you would have to walk a ways to get to the metropolitan train station, like at least 2 miles. And I did have to walk a couple of miles to get to the train station one time for job interviews that were in downtown Chicago, Illinois at that time. But this was, over 20 years ago. So anyway, bringing that up is kind of like a synchronistic way of saying that it's like a reshift into a different dimension and or reality, because that's what dreams are to me. That the trajectory had changed, because yes, I did take him up on his offer to take me to those places, take me to the job location in those instances that he offered me a ride, right? I didn't do that in this reality back when I lived up in Chicago at that time. I didn't take those offers of rides because I wasn't trusting men like that. I wouldn't trust nobody. I didn't, do that. But anyway, so he gave me a ride and I made it to the job places. And what's interesting is that they're like, okay, well, let's have a discussion. And, it was like 6 or 10 other people. And it felt more as a cosmic, okay, we're going to let you out of this contract that you've assigned yourself or that you've agreed upon. And, we're going to give you a severance pay. And like, okay. And it was like they were going to give me 2 different types of severance pay. It was going to be like a huge cash amount, one time lump sum, and then it was going to be a check is in the mail type of situation. And then they were asking me certain other questions, in the process of, I guess they were trying to just test to see my integrity level. But at the same time, they knew that I knew that this was an exit interview, and I didn't feel no kind of emotional way about it. I was, standing in my integrity of what I was and who I was overall as a character and as a person, that I was not going to concede what it was they wanted me to concede to in this business arrangement and or agreement, just so I can say I've held and maintained this so-called job, which was, to my world, just over broke. So how that correlates also into this reality and my experience of being let go of back in 2009, back in Chicago, that was a scenario where I handled it the same way, okay? Because the way it changed and reshifted my trajectory, it was that earlier in that year, 2009, I had been looking to leave Chicago anyway, right? And I had actually went on a job interview. I drove all the way down from Chicago to Savannah, Georgia for a job interview that I did not get, but I was grateful for the experience within itself, because it still transported me and gave me a visual of what I wanted to manifest and what I wanted to happen. And my vision did end up becoming realized not even 7 months later, because 7 months later I was packing up a brand new U-Haul that I was given, and I was hauling ass from suburban Chicago with my then, I think, 8-year-old son, with my SUV on the back of the U-Haul, and I was pulling that thing by myself down I-65, and then transformed over from Nashville, Tennessee, up into whatever that was I was doing to link up to Georgia, and hit I-65, I think, from Chattanooga, and drove all the way down to Savannah, Georgia. Now it took me, I want to say, over 24 hours to drive from Chicagoland down to Savannah, Georgia, but I made it down them country roads, and it was at night, and it was by myself. It was just me and my 8-year-old son sitting in that passenger seat, pushing that big ass U-Haul with my, SUV on the back. Now the blessing in that also was that it was so many beautiful things that happened, because I didn't have to pay for a mover or anything like that. And the guy who also at that time was helping his mom out, with his younger siblings, he was the same one who helped me unload my moving boxes into the apartment. I had what you call a door-to-door moving container, dropped off at my then townhome in Chicagoland. He unloaded it when I first moved there, and then he helped and his friends loaded my U-Haul without me having to pay them a dime, nothing. Like, he refused payment, and I had been there for like 3 or 4 years at that point. But he called his friends and, they loaded up my U-Haul within a couple of hours. That was a beautiful blessing. So it's like that dream that I had last night or this morning or whatever, was like synchronistic in a way of a man assisting me in spaces that I didn't even know I needed assistance. And it's not a man necessarily, it's just the principle of me standing on my integrity and being who I authentically am, and at the same time not conceding and backing down or cowering to bullshit. And yes, taking, what was due me in the terms of compensation at that time, and making my way with my life and living my best life. Because after I left Chicagoland and moved to Savannah, I was able to pick and choose what I wanted, because they did give me a beautiful severance package. Yes, they did. Oh, it was glorious. I didn't have to work for a whole year if I didn't want to. I decided I wanted to work because that's what I was, programmed and, not conditioned, or still in my deconditioning process not to do. But it was a beautiful experience, and I'm grateful that I had that. And so me waking up here on the other side of the world, having that dream, and then being able to correlate that to an actual physical experience I had over a decade ago, and being able to see how far I've come, and now where's my trajectory now. Now, that particular dream also is something that is happening in the spiritual world and the cosmic level, because I've had dreams like that before, where I am no longer being held accountable to a contract that is no longer suitable for me, or better yet, is not better aligned to who I've mastered and developed and evolved into. So that's what I would say for you. If you're, as they say, is as above, so below. So things that are happening in your so-called physical reality and earthly reality, you got to know it's happening in the spiritual and the invisible also. So with that being all said, understand that if you're going through a space where you've been fired from a job or let go from a job, or, it's whatever you've been doing business practice wise is no longer suitable for your best interests in the long run, you have to see it as such, okay? And be standing in your integrity and your authenticity for your further evolutionary process to hold in your space, so that you can be compensated as well as be taken in the spaces beyond your wildest and best outcomes and incomes of imagination, desires, and blessings. Because that's exactly what happened to me in those scenarios, both in the imaginary, the dream, and in this so-called physical reality, all those years ago for me. And that's not the one and only time that's happened where I was so-called fired or let go from a job. And the benefit to that scenario that I mentioned about in Chicagoland, in that particular scenario, it was not something that was of my fault. It was actually a mass layoff. So I and a plethora of other, like 2,000 other people have been let go of within the span of a 6-month period. But remember, going back earlier that year, I had already been looking to leave. I just didn't know how it was going to happen. I thought that I knew by planning, I'm going to find a job and get down there. And no, that's not what happened at all. I drove down there. I did not get that job. I did not get that opportunity, but it was still just enough, because there was a thing that I did do. While I was there, I did at night go and drive to Tybee Island, and I wanted to dip my big toe in the ocean, because I hadn't done that in a very long time, years, almost a decade. And so I went and I did that, and I did my little cry and let my tears hit the ocean water. And I just pleaded with the universe, if you just allow me this opportunity to somehow or another make it here and be able to call it home here, so that me and my son can benefit and live a different life, I would be so grateful. And I will follow and be your loyal servant. And that's exactly what happened, because 6 months later, I was able to call Savannah, Georgia home for the next 5 years. Now, that's just what I wanted to share as an inspiration, as a reality, and to also pull together the power of your intentions and your envisions and your persistence instead of your insistence. Okay? All right, y'all, stay delicious.